Hey there, and welcome to That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Tuesday, February 15th of 2022, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me, as always, is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Hello.
How you doing, Trev?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I am doing wonderful. It is a lovely little Tuesday out here in Austin, Texas. We got big games dropping all around us, left and right. And in the spirit of that, with Horizon Forbidden West coming out later this week, we thought it would be fitting to kind of dive back into the world of the first game in the series, Horizon Zero Dawn, and to kind of talk our memories, our favorite moments, things we didn't like, favorite characters, kind of beats along the way, just kind of have a retrospective on that game before hopping into Forbidden West here in a few days. I will open it up to you first, actually, Trevor, because I know that you in particular really loved this game. It was your game of the year, in fact, in 2017, I believe. Time's a flat circle. But yeah, in 2017. So Trevor, what made Horizon Zero Dawn so special to you?
So I pulled up my like game of the year kind of write up from 2017. And I will say it was in addition to it being my game of the year that year, I in excitement for this week, I've spent basically the last couple nights just kind of like revisiting the original game and kind of like getting a feel for that combat again. And one of the things I wrote in here that like absolutely still holds up is I love how fluid and dynamic the combat is. Whether it's, early game here trying to, take out a grazer or like pick off their little like blaze tanks off their back or whatever, that's fun and engaging. And then like I'm immediately having thoughts of like going buck wild and taking out Thunderjaws, when you're super powered up and much further down the line. And that's definitely the thing I think that stands out for me the most is like it just had such wonderful gameplay. I'm also a big sucker for like the story that is told in that world. In particular, I drew the comparison to another game that I just sat down and replayed, Uncharted 4, because the Horizon Zero Dawn has basically like multiple timelines of storytelling going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're playing in this like far futuristic, world where basically mankind has been decimated and is like reborn and kind of coming back to life. With these like, all these technological kind of creatures and stuff around. So you're getting like that present day story, but then you have basically like the story that is told in Aloy's quest and journey about like the fall of man and kind of what led to the world that we live in. And then, as many of these kinds of games have, there's just also a crap ton of like fun collectibles that kind of like flesh out and tell like extra little side stories and stuff throughout the world. It's an Ish's Tale kind of thing from Last of Us.
It's a great
so I love all of those elements. One of the elements that I have thought about pretty on and off for the last couple years as I got further and further away from Horizon Zero Dawn is that like I don't know what necessarily is like the factor of this, but like I've forgotten so many of the like individual characters of the game.
Sure.
Like hopping back in, and I guess part of it is there's probably a very like innate version or very like rudimentary version that is like a lot of them have very out there names, and not out there names, but like very not names I'm used to. Like one of the characters I just came across, and I've seen him in like footage and stuff of the sequel, so I know he's going to be back and has a presence, and maybe he's even like a companion character or something. It's like Varl, who's like one of the Nora that like you encounter very early in the game, and kind of like you do a couple quests with or for him and stuff like that. And like his name is Varl. That's not a name I encounter on any kind of regular basis.
Day-to-day basis, yeah.
So I think that I think that combined with it's often hard to like really cement memorable characters in giant open world games where 90% of what you're doing is just playing in the world and like going and finding and discovering things, and like only 10% of the game is the story, or 10% of your time with the game is the story. So I don't have like a great memory of a lot of the characters, which is why it's fun kind of hopping back into it before the game. Like I do remember Silence, obviously, the Lance Reddick character, as, you know, kind of a mentor slash, you know, maybe ultimately big bad, who will continue to have a presence in the new game. But I think that was one of the things where like the years went by, I was like, who were the characters in that game? And it's just much more interesting, I think. Or one of the things that I really like appreciated about the game is the mythology of the world. So like I remember like the cool aspects of the tribes and stuff, and the different like belief structures that exist in this world, even if I don't remember like the specific, you know, such and such a character.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to touch on, is that I think for me, and I was reading my own Game of the Year wrap up from 2017, I had Horizon Zero Dawn at number 4, which is no disservice to the game. Again, 2017 is arguably my favorite year for games ever, so it is still a very, very, very high spot on that list.
Yeah, that's behind. What is that behind for you? That's behind Hellblade, obviously. I think was your number 1 that year, right?
Hellblade, yeah, maybe my game of the generation. It's also behind Resident Evil 7, which is my favorite horror game of all time, and then it's behind What Remains of Edith Finch.
That's right.
Which was basically my runaway game of the year winner all the way until the end of December when I played Hellblade. But yeah, I mean it's just a great year for games, like genuinely, in 2017, and so we were blessed with kind of this abundance of really amazing games. And Horizon, I think, is really special, and I was kind of reading my review for it then, and I liked it in that it is just an epic, right? It is a Lawrence of Arabia style, just epic in like the true sense of that word. And there are elements of the game that I didn't like. I stand by, I think the first act is a little slow, really. I think when you're kind of I think that game hits its stride once you kind of get to like the Sun Kingdom area. It really becomes, I think, a whole different kind of game in a really fun and engaging way. I think Aloy begins to kind of become a more compelling protagonist for me, as someone who had a lot of issues with her, particularly in like that first act of the game. For me, yeah, the characters themselves are hit or miss a lot of the times, right? Like I was kind of thinking this game reminds me a lot of like The Last Airbender, in terms of you kind of meet a lot of various characters along the way over those seasons, but there are really only a few that matter that you have to kind of remember the names for. And this is sort of a similar experience for me. And what makes both so special is the culture and mythology of the different places you visit, right? Like, and the level of depth, I think, to each of the cultures, right? Like if you don't want it, then you'll still get a lot of it. But if you do actively want to know more about like each of the tribes and each of their cultures and histories, you can really fall down a well. And like I found myself really in particular fascinated by like that Sun Kingdom, right? And like the lineage of like the Sun Kings going back like hundreds of years, right? And like finding documents that like document like each one of the Sun Kings' reigns and like what kind of a ruler they were. And like I found that so fascinating as someone with obviously my love of history. Like it spoke directly to me, and it, I think, is the point of the game where you get really kind of into like the political aspects of everything and like kind of the economy of what this world looks like and the culture and the kind of competing interest all mixing together. And I think I could have had just an entire game just set there. And the fact that we get so much more than that, I think, is a testament to Horizon Zero Dawn, right? Like, obviously, my biggest issues with the game at the time certainly were with Aloy. And I think those were largely, if not resolved, then certainly I didn't feel as much issue with her character by the end of the game. I think she went on a really great arc for me from where she started. And kind of, I think, where that game begins, I found Aloy to be a really angry character, and not necessarily for like undeserved reasons. Her justifications for being angry are totally fair and valid, but I just found her to be a really angry character, really standoffish, and she didn't really seem to care to help anyone. It was very much her own journey. And I like the fact that by the end of that game, it felt much more of she's helping other people around. Like she's much more, I think, like service focused, right? And she kind of made, I think, amends with her tribe and that larger journey she goes on. And so I like that arc, right? And I like the world of the game, but like really to me, and it's sort of what I said for Forbidden West when we talked about it. I can't remember if it was off air or not. We do so many of these shows, but in terms of like for Forbidden West, like if the story of that game is fine or whatever, it's still gonna be a game where I'm fighting robot dinosaurs, and like at the end of the day, that's a pretty convincing hook, right? And that never got old, and the confrontations you have, and the ability to take them down, and the varied, creatures you fight, and some of those moments, right? Like fighting like the T-Rex, like, Robo Dino, and like constantly avoiding it, for it felt like so much of that game. And so then by the end, when you do have these encounters where you either can't avoid it, or you kind of like stumble into an encounter with that and like fighting that, and those become moments that I think get woven into the larger tapestry the game is telling of like your personal story with that world. And yeah, I mean, Horizon is something truly special, and that's before we even get into like the really, really great central twist that lies at the heart of that game.
Yeah, it's definitely like I'm very excited. Like one of the other elements that I loved about the original game, obviously, is where it is set in the world, because it was pretty nearby to me, and especially when you get to like some of the late game stuff, it is like, oh, that's like like Monument Valley kind of stuff. Like I've been there, I've seen those places. And so heading further west, heading over to California and San Francisco and stuff like that in the new one, just leaves me more excited about like that, especially just because as a predominantly West Coast kid, like it will be cool to see how they reinterpret elements of that, and what elements are shown off and stuff. Obviously we've seen from trailers and stuff, the Golden Gate Bridge, very like still standing, but also like very overgrown and stuff like that. And obviously we'll see a lot of like downtown San Francisco, and the giant towers that we didn't necessarily see in like the Denver area of the last one. Like one of the big buildings in the last one was like, oh, here's like, a Denver stadium, a football stadium kind of thing that like a bandit clan has basically like overtaken and like, planted themselves down in. So I'll be curious to see just like, I guess more with like how different factions have kind of continued to spring up elsewhere further west.
Yeah, I think, there is an element of these games taking place in areas that aren't usually as focused on in games, and really media at large, especially the first one, right? Like that kind of part of the West is not the area that most places kind of go to for their films or TV shows, or certainly video games. And even San Francisco, while more popular, is still not the usual like LA or New York destination. And so I also think that game, along with The Last of Us a little bit actually, I find really neat because they do focus on areas of the country that aren't as well, I think, documented within the video game industry, right? Like obviously The Last of Us is going to like Salt Lake City and those kind of locations. And so for me, or Pittsburgh, and so for me, I think it is one of the things that I find most exciting, right? Like I want to see what their interpretation of San Francisco looks like, right? And how they adapt to like the verticality of those larger buildings and what that looks like, and how they, utilize that space that is so completely different than a lot of the huge landscapes of the first game, and kind of more plains area. And then also it feels like the much greater focus on like water
Mm-hmm.
and like the oceans and where we're going there is something that is super appealing to me because water in video games. I've also been playing a lot of Dying Light 2, so this is partially sprang from that. But like water in video games, I find inherently unnerving a little bit, right? Like I think we've just been too pre-programmed at this point in time in my life to like some sort of bullshit jump scare happening, right? And so like anytime I have to go in water, I inherently don't like it. I just don't trust it. I would like rather go anywhere else than that. Um, and so to see that and see what they utilize there, knowing that they're like robot crocodiles in the waters, right? It's gonna be like, all right, like I don't want to do this, but I have to, and like those kind of close calls, I'm sure you're gonna get into, and also just how I cannot stress enough beautiful the water looks in what we've seen from this game so far. Yeah, it has me so excited for the way they're incorporating new landscapes and new kind of terrain within Forbidden West from where we were at in the first game, which had really gorgeous vistas, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think touching back on your point about like the verticality of the game. Obviously, we've seen from the trailers, and one of the big new elements that people have been talking about are like you get this like basically a grapple hook kind of thing that allows you to like
Mm.
shoot long distances and kind of like shoot up in the air or something like that, and the like solar glider thing that's basically going to be your Breath of the Wild, let's float along back down to the ground kind of mechanic, that I think is going to really play a role in a lot of that.
Mm.
I think the game is being designed with that in mind of like this is a more vertical game,
Mm.
so let's not punish the player and say like, okay, you have to like find the path down. Like, no, you can like jump off a cliff and you'll be fine. You don't have to just find the one zip line that'll get you back down to the ground
Yeah.
anymore. So
Yeah, I
yeah, I think
think
an element that I'm certainly interested in as well.
I'm curious too because we've touched on it, but I do want to double back to obviously the kind of big central twist of Zero Dawn as well, right? Like I feel like it'd be remiss if we didn't go to that. And how in the moment kind of though the kind of the big reveals of what had happened and who Aloy is and her connection to kind of the past all played out for you when you first experienced it and are kind of re-experiencing it now, I guess too.
I mean, this is I guess another element because like I can I mean there's an element of I think I can identify what you mean by the big twists, but like
Mm,
I didn't like looking back on it 5 years later, I'm not thinking of it as big twists so much as like I'm thinking of it as storytelling. And some of it might have been like, oh, I was kind of expecting certain things to
mm,
go that way,
sure.
based on the different pieces and stuff I was finding. So like I guess I don't even know necessarily what you're classifying as the big twist.
Mm,
Um because yeah, nothing's like jumping out at me as like, oh my god, that completely like
sure.
defined this game for me. And
Yeah.
I think another bit of that is going back to like so much of what really defines this game for me is the gameplay
Mm,
versus like the story beats and story elements and stuff and the characters have faded a little bit more over time.
sure.
That I like that's one of the reasons honestly I was like I'm replaying it before the game is to like refresh my mind on
Yeah.
where did we leave off, what were the big things that I'm going to need to
Become
know kind
reacquainted
of
with these
coming into this
people.
game. But like I mean certainly like kind of the connection to like Elizabeth and stuff
Mm,
from the past is like an interesting kind of like, oh okay, that's a cool way of kind of explaining why Aloy is this very special character in this world that like you know exists apart from everybody else, and why certain things work for her that don't work for other people.
yeah, I think there's that. I also think just what happened to the world, right? I guess in terms of like that
Oh,
river, like how the
okay.
world came to be where it's at too.
Hmm.
And I think
I mean, I guess
w-
I've just experienced so many like like
apocalyptic video
like,
game. Yeah,
we did this to ourselves kind of stories that like
sure.
when we got to that I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's of course. Like
Especially through the
I've read
looking
enough
glass of
Asimov.
2022, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read enough
Um,
Asimov. I know we're always going to screw this stuff up.
yeah, I think one of the elements I liked of Horizon is that it's sort of a really sad video game. And there is an embrace of that, right? Like obviously different than like The Last of Us, but like I do think there is just kind of this air of melancholia through a lot of that game, at least through the story beats. And I think it is sort of strengthened by its setting in that aspect, right? Where it is just kind of these like vast, open, empty plains where you just kind of have time to like be by yourself and think. And I think it fits really well with the story that game is telling, right? Like one of my favorite parts of the entire game, narratively or any otherwise, is I guess you'd call it like the epilogue, like after the game is over and like Ayla goes to see like her mom's like frozen kind of body thing, like at like the bench. And I just found that incredibly beautiful and moving. And
Mhm.
it's like one of the moments that is like burned in my mind, even as a lot of the other story beats have kind of faded away because I think it was delivered so well. And I think that's sort of what sticks out with me, like those kind of moments, those intangible moments, right? Like I think that is what I think of when I think of the game story, or just like it's just sort of sad, and even a lot of stuff with like the Sun Kingdom and obviously Aloy's relationship with her like original tribe are all just kind of really tinged with like tragedy and sadness and kind of this like rough edged emotional feel to it
Yeah, I mean,
that
like
I actually really enjoyed.
the tutorial ish portion of the game basically ends with your father figure that has raised you dying.
Oh
So
right, yeah,
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 like
that's a
like
great point.
Rost is basically like he sacrifices himself to save you, you know,
That's a great point.
an hour and a half into the game or whatever. So it is like which is like, and we've talked about this you and I before, like cuz you've mentioned in the past your aversion or how it took you a while to warm up to Aloy.
Hmm.
Whereas like I love how like I love Aloy as our introductory character, or as our point of view character for this story, because she has been an outcast. So we're everything we're learning as she's learning them through her eyes. And
Hmm.
I like completely understand, and as you kind of alluded, like her rage and anger towards people is completely justified because she's been kept on
Hmm.
the outs and people threw rocks at her for no reason just because she was not part of
Different,
their tribe and
yeah.
stuff like that. So like I appreciate that in this world she's going to be a little guarded. And it's especially interesting to hear you kind of be like, oh, and she's not interested in helping people, because like I'm playing through the early game stuff and she's happy to help, and she's like, you know, she's engaging with people, and you know, I'm doing the side quests and stuff, and she's happy to help them. She might be like, okay, it's going to cost you this time, like to like I saved you from the things that were attacking you, now you want me to go get this other thing, okay, you're going to pay me to do that. So but like that's just kind of, you know, also the economy of this world. You know, you'd like it like resources are lacking enough that like you don't want to do something for free just, you know,
Mm.
out of the goodness or whatever. So it's like I don't think I ever had the same aversion to Aloy as the character that you did. So like
Mm.
I like her, and I like Ashley Birch's performance kind of like from the jump.
Sure.
I thought it like she's giving a lot of different layers to this character, um, that like, you know, fully support a character who lived mostly in isolation for
Mm.
her youth, and then loses that one person that was with her, and then is immediately thrust into this like she is the savior of the world kind of storyline. That's a lot to take in.
Mm. Yeah, I think, you know, that's all totally just right. That's all fair. Obviously, I mean, obviously, it's all subjective in terms of how each person approaches that character. For me, yeah, I think as she sees more of that world, I think, and as she kind of um, is opened up to such different experiences as her journey kind of goes on, I think she opens up in a much more engaging way for me as a kind of like central protagonist, right? Like I think Aloy is sort of she's a teenager, right? Or she's someone in like her early 20s when the game begins. And I think her worldview is sort of represented in that, where it is sort of like, it's my way. Like, I'm right and you're wrong and you just don't get it kind of thing. And I like that while still largely being right because she's Aloy, she's the main character of the game. By the end of the game, I think she delivers her messages in a less blunt, less kind of like, I'm right because I'm right. You just, how do you not get it kind of way that I find to be less kind of jarring and blunt to deal with, right? It's not as much of like a punch to the face, right? Like, I think the relish in like saying like, you're wrong and here's why is gone a little bit from like the latter part of the game. And I enjoy those interactions more because it felt real to someone who has seen more of the world and been like, oh, hey, like maybe there were some things I was not right about or hadn't thought about. And so I like that evolution of where her character goes in that aspect, right? And how she grows along this journey, right? And what she does and kind of bringing the various different like tribes and kind of region together by like the final part of that game. And so that for me is sort of, I think, the big strength, where like by the end of the game, Aloy is still not like my favorite video game character, but she's definitely someone that I'm much more comfortable spending 50, 60 hours with, right? And like am enjoying much more. I think she develops a sense of humor along the way too, which really helps out in those kind of aspects. And like the cast of characters she kind of grows around her, I think help to further shine a light on her personality and what makes her fun and why they would want to hang out with her, right? And so I think all of those also kind of help strengthen that character as the game goes on.
Cool. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hopping in to the sequel.
I know, right? Yeah. Did you have any final thoughts or impressions on Horizon Zero Dawn? Anything that you are then excited about for Forbidden West? We'll do any final thoughts on Zero Dawn first. We'll do that.
No, I don't think. I mean, like, I guess the last little thing was that the game is beautiful. Like the original one. Even going back to it now, like there are some like character models. It's not like the most natural character models. It has a little bit of that like Fallout, Skyrim vibe to the character models. But the world that itself is so gorgeous, and one of the things I'd highlighted was, especially once you start getting out of the very snow-capped areas of the opening sequence, you start seeing all of these vibrant colors, these reds and oranges and purples in the sky. And I wrote at the time that it was like the first time in a video game I feel like I've seen like the sunrises and sunsets that I get here in Arizona, which are notoriously kind of like just those kinds of like multicolored things. And they just did a great job of capturing that without doing the thing that I hate of like, oh, it's also like I'm driving into the sun and like the glare is, a pain on the eyes or whatever. So they did a great job of kind of like balancing those two aspects. But yeah, just the vibrancy of the world. I will see, like, once you get out of that first kind of opening area of the game that is like, oh, it's snow-capped mountains and stuff like that. Like, once you get into the more diverse biomes that the game has to offer, I think there's just such a richness to the world. And it's fun in the way that, like, this is a world that is basically being re-terraformed by the robot creatures around you and stuff like that. So there are swamplands in, Utah or whatever. It doesn't make sense to what we have now, but like it helps justify why you've got giant crocodile robots that you're facing off against in swamps and stuff like that. So yeah, just lots of cool stuff there. And I'm very like the gameplay is just already so top notch. You and I talked a little bit yesterday, like one of the only real like, like after the review embargo dropped, one of the only videos I've really watched was a video that was basically like, here are like 7 little things that the game has kind of quality of life changes that they've made from Zero Dawn into Forbidden West. And like all of those little things, I was like, oh, all of those things sound great. I love that. I can't wait to like not have to deal with the hassle of those things again, and I can just like enjoy the big beautiful world that they throw me into.
Yeah, I think that reminded me that like I guess the review of like why the creatures are there and what their purpose is too, in terms of like terraforming the planet again, and then also the just like giant mountain like red rocks of like the Sun Kingdom, right? When you first see like how high up that goes, or like there's a moment where like you are just like walking along and see this just absolutely gorgeous like essentially rainforest just spread out for it seems like forever in front of you. You're like above it when you first see it, and it is just gorgeous. And the vibrancy of colors in the forest of that game, right? And just like the purples and the yellows and the greens and the blues and the red, like it is so beautiful. And at the time, this was one of the best looking games ever made. And 5 years later, it is still stunning, I think, even more so with what they've kind of done. I mean, the game is just beautiful. I mean, it is just a gorgeous, gorgeous video game. And I love that the ability of all the creatures to terraform the kind of world has let it do stuff like that, of having swamps in Utah, right? And next to a rainforest, next to, a snow-packed mountain, next to like this like barren desert land, and all be captured in such vivid detail. The game is absolutely beautiful. Its sunrises are astonishing, especially if you can catch them like on top of some sort of like rock or mountain or hill,
or a tall neck, which
yes.
Absolutely I'm going to be buying the Lego tall neck that got announced today.
Hell yeah. I mean, that'll be my last thing that I give a shout out to, are the tall necks, and just standing on top of them and the map like exploding out from there, and like the 360 where Assassin's Creed like view shots. And it's just, there is a sense, I think, of great pride, as there should be, in the beauty of that game. And this is a series, I think, that prides itself on nature and kind of the preservation of it. Obviously, even with like the trophy stuff that we've kind of seen, they've announced like today. There's such a celebration of the world in this game. And there are a lot of really, really beautiful video games. A lot, right? Like I think of some of the Uncharted Naughty Dog games, The Last of Us. But there are few, I think, that have such a celebration of the world itself as like its own character as in the Horizon series. And it is one of easily the strongest characters of the game, and one of the ones that is just so easy to get lost in like its beauty, because it is so well crafted and so vivid and so diverse in its just colors and landscapes.
It's also we don't get a ton of these, but it's a post-apocalyptic game that, despite the fact that you're running around fighting robot creatures and beasts and stuff, doesn't feel bleak. Like, it like
great,
the world has come back enough that there are thriving cultures and cities and communities and stuff in there. And they're nowhere near, the scope and scale of, a modern day kind of thing. But
2020,
like they have, like, life has found a way. And so like there is, I think that's another facet that we've kind of like touched around, is like there is a brightness to this game and a life to this game, compared to like a Last of Us, where like everything is just sad because they're still in it and the clickers are still everywhere and they're still fucking with people, and like they have not like reached past that point. Like there are some creatures that are still very hostile, but they also largely will stay and do their own thing, and they won't like unless the corruptors are being kind of like played and pitted against people. Like, people have found a way to coexist.
Right.
And so yeah, there's and just again going back to like the tall necks, it is like they do like I did the first one in the game the other day, and like getting back up there and just like yeah, that like the explosion of like the map kind of opening up and the celebration of it is like the towers of a Ubisoft game, of a Far Cry or something, or an Assassin's Creed, but like you move with it. It's not a static thing. Like you get up there and you can just kind of hang out up there as the tall neck continues to walk around in their little path and just kind of like enjoy the beauty, the changing beauty around you, versus like I've stood up on the top of the thing, the camera did a 360. Okay, now I'm going to jump into a bale of hay. So, yeah.
I this game's real good, isn't it? Yeah, I haven't gone back to Horizon. I guess whenever the DLC would have dropped, which would have been 2018.
No, it was end of 2017. It came out like later that year.
Then I probably played some of it maybe in 2018 at least, then to give myself some credit. But like I haven't gone back to it in 4 years, right?
Yeah. It was very much. It was. I wrote about it like when it came out. Game came out in like February, and then the DLC came out like near the end of the year, which was great and bad. In that it was great in that like I hopped back into what had been throughout the year my game of the year, and like it just further cemented the things I loved about it. But it was also jumping back to a high level DLC 7 months after you've last played that game isn't the most onboarding friendly thing. So like having to relearn how to fight some of those monsters and stuff, I was getting my butt kicked like the first the first bits of it.
Yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn is a great game. I know myself and Trevor are each very, very excited for Forbidden West when it comes out this week. You can be sure we're going to have all kinds of fun conversations and reviews and topics around that. I'm sure this upcoming week's episode of, I mean, honestly, probably both that Nerdy Site Show and that News to Care About will be centered around Horizon in some capacity. Yeah, I'm excited. Trevor's excited. Trevor, that's a show, but we each have shout-outs this week. What is your shout-out?
My shout-out is an article from Ars Technica titled "This Nintendo Insider Fooled Thousands of Followers with Fake Predictions." It's by Kyle Orland. It was I don't know I don't remember who kind of like put it in my feed yesterday, but I was like, oh, I'm curious what this is about, and I hopped into it. And basically what it was obviously we had the Nintendo Direct last week that had like a handful of announcements and stuff. And this guy had done, and this is kind of a common way of doing this thing, but he had basically created a private Twitter account, and a few days before like the Direct, just tweeted probably hundreds of like predictions, and then waited until the Direct came out and then deleted out all of the ones that were wrong and kept like the ones that worked and tied in and made it look like he knew what he was talking about. So like all of the tweets are a couple days before the Direct. And basically then he went to like game forums and stuff like that and started kind of like seeding out there that like there was this, undiscovered Twitter account that knew all of these things that were in the Direct. And it started getting like picked up, and kind of like his threads got shared and like thrown into a couple of articles or whatever. And then he basically like posted a video of like, hey, here's how I created a fake insider account, and kind of talked through that whole process of like keeping it like hidden, just doing a complete scattershot approach, and then just very liberally deleting out all of the tweets that were not that would have like not fit into that narrative. So I thought it was just a like, I hadn't seen the insider beforehand, so this was like my first like introduction to him. I don't follow enough, I guess, of those circles or whatever. But yeah, it was like oh yep, that's, people can do that, and people can very easily get duped by it, because like if he hadn't come clean, it's like, okay, yeah, he seemed to know a lot of those things, and the dates of the tweets were before the Direct. But yeah, it's just kind of like how to fake you're an insider in 3 easy steps.
And 101, right? Yeah, it's a great shout out. That'll be in the show notes as well. My shout out is Bond theme. Obviously, what could it otherwise be?
Video game themed? I don't know. You could have gone with video games for a video game show, but sure, yeah. Bond. This is that Bond show, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? We don't do shout outs in that Bond show really, but I want to give it a shout out because I thought it's a really great conversation. It is from Calvin Dyson, and he had a whole conversation around queer characters in the James Bond films. He had David Lowbridge Ellis from License to Queer on as well, and they just kind of went through the history of queer characters in the Bond series from both the novels and mainly focused on the films, and kind of charted the series 60-year history of the characters. They've been there from the second film onwards. I thought it was a super interesting conversation and a super insightful part of the series that we don't typically think about even really or talk about.
Yeah, it's especially it's in response to the like throwaway line in No Time to Die that established Q as queer. And like all of the think pieces that came out were like, oh, Bond had its first openly gay character or whatever. It's like, okay, sure, but they've had...
You've never seen Diamonds Are Forever.
Exactly. They've had characters...
Mr. Wit and Mr. Kidd, yeah. And so, yeah, they pulled a lot of that. It was, I thought, a really great conversation, and I think having it be led by two gay men, right, and getting their perspectives on the series, obviously 6-decade long grappling with toxic masculinity, and kind of hearing their thoughts on that and hearing its thoughts on, you know, how it's viewed members of their own community, I found really, really, really fascinating and really engaging. And I thought it was a great conversation by Calvin and David. And so I encourage everyone to go check that out. Yeah, those are the shout outs for this episode. Go check out Calvin in general. He's got a lot. I've fallen down a rabbit hole for his channel in general the last couple weeks as we've done a James Bond series. Otherwise, counter tick. That is the show. If you like what you heard, you can go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where you may already be watching the video version. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, leave a comment below telling us what your thoughts on Horizon are and what you are excited about in Forbidden West here in 2 days' time. So by the time you listen to this. Otherwise, you can go over to the podcast server of your choice and like and subscribe there. Rate and review us on iTunes. Leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the algorithms and help bump us up further there. Spread the good word. You can also go over to thatnerdysite.com. Check out all the latest reviews, features, op-eds, pieces going live over there. All kinds of good stuff happening. Finally, you can go find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trevor, anything you want to plug?
I am the current run of That Nerdy Site Plays episodes is my revisiting of the Life is Strange remaster. So you can go check that out on our youtube.com/thatnerdysite. I've basically got all of those recorded and scheduled at this point, but I realized, I might want to try and do like a Horizon Forbidden West episode in there somewhere. So I might I might insert one of those either in as a bonus episode or as a or to kind of like delay that series at the moment. But yeah, check out our Let's Plays that go live every Tuesday and Thursday, as well as our currently running series, Friday Night Dying Light, where Cameron is going through every Friday night and playing through Dying Light 2 with a really no real reason for it other than like the word light, but he's doing it with fun. A Friday Night Lights theme. So he'll say clear hearts, full eyes, can't lose a lot or whatever.
Go check out all that. You can also go find me at LiftyLogie, at LiftyLogie on the internet, LOGGY. I'll echo that shout out. There's a lot of great stuff happening on the YouTube side of things in general, like that Bond show we mentioned earlier. I'm actually going to give a shout out over to the slate of Game of the Year's content we've got. We've had pretty much all of it out. My Game of the Year piece will go live this week. Trevor,
I've put up a couple. I've still got to do my actual proper.
I was going to say, you haven't done your actual one yet. Yeah, Trevor's top 10 list will go live soon. You can already go check out Cameron and Frank's written pieces, as well as Frank having done a video version of his. So go check out all that. Go check out the 4-hour-long podcast we did as well. Back from January for That Nerdy Site show.
I do have a couple lists that are up there. I have my platinum, my favorite platinums of last year list, as well as my favorite games that weren't 2021 games that I played last year. I did those lists as the like lead up to the big, here's my game of the year list that I just haven't finished yet.
So go check out all of that. It's a lot of good stuff.
I'll get it up there before 2023.
Yeah, exactly. I'm real proud of all that. Otherwise, you can go check out That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet. For myself, for Trevor, for all of us here at That Nerdy Site, play your games and be good to each other.